April 26th, 1986, 1:23 in the morning. A safety test begins at a nuclear power station in Soviet Ukraine. Within seconds, something goes wrong. And within minutes, the world changes. You already know the name, Chernobyl. Here is a question for this review. Does Midnight in Chernobyl reveal something most people still do not understand? Or is the hype around this book bigger than the book itself? And do you actually know what happened? Or do you just think you do? Because by the end of this video, you will understand why one of the most famous disasters in modern history was buried, distorted, and repackaged, and why it took a journalist over a decade to dig out what was actually true. And you will know whether this book is worth your time, or whether the awards, the bestseller lists, and the critical praise are doing more work than the book itself. The book is Midnight in Chernobyl, The Untold Story of the World's Greatest Nuclear Disaster by Adam Higginbotham. Published in 2019 by Simon & Schuster, this is not a quick disaster recap. Higginbotham spent more than 10 years building it, drawing from interviews, archives, documents, and accounts that had been buried for decades. And the praise was immediate. Major reviewers called it cinematic, deeply reported, and almost movie-like. It won the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction. It was named one of the best books of the year by major publications. So on paper, the book looks almost impossible to dismiss. But that creates the real question. Does the book actually earn that reputation? So the hype is real. But hype can do two things. It can point you toward a book worth reading, or it can make you expect the wrong book entirely. And that matters here, because Midnight in Chernobyl is not simply asking you to remember a disaster. It is asking you to question the version of the disaster you were given. Most people know the outline. A reactor explodes. Radiation moves silently across borders. A city built for the future becomes a place people can no longer safely enter. Families leave without understanding what they are leaving behind. And the world slowly realizes that the official story is not the whole story. What this book does is something different. It does not just tell you what happened. It tells you why it happened, and why, for years, you were not supposed to know. Higginbotham does not start the story on the night of the explosion. He starts earlier, at the construction of the plant itself, at the building of Pripyat, the city built to house the workers, at the political decisions, the budget pressures, the culture of an empire that made it dangerous to report bad news. Because that is the argument at the heart of this book. Chernobyl was not only a machine failure, it was a truth failure, a leadership failure, a system failure, decades in the making. The book argues that warnings, doubts, and earlier failures were buried inside a system where bad news was dangerous. Technical concerns did not always travel freely. Lessons that might have mattered were hidden, minimized, or trapped inside the machinery of state secrecy. And when reactor number 4 finally exploded, the response followed the same logic. Protect the system, minimize the damage, control the story. Moscow refused all Western offers of assistance, not because they had the situation under control, but because accepting help would mean admitting they did not. This becomes important later, because it shapes the question the book is actually asking. Not just what happened, but who controlled the truth while people were still living inside the consequences. In terms of the reading experience, the pattern across reviews is consistent. This reads like narrative nonfiction written with thriller discipline. It feels less like watching a disaster happen suddenly and more like watching a system fail piece by piece, while everyone inside it is told to keep pretending it works. The prose is accessible. Higginbotham is a journalist, not an academic, and the book reflects that. It is written to be read, not studied. But it is not light reading. The book asks you to track names, titles, ministries, technical decisions, political pressure, and a system where responsibility is almost designed to disappear. The first section, which builds the world before the explosion, moves deliberately. Some readers find this slower stretch exactly what gives the disaster its full weight. Others find it tests their patience. And this is where readers begin to split. And that split matters, because the book's biggest strength may also be the reason some readers quit. Because this is not a lean disaster narrative. It is something bigger than that. And the question of whether that bigger thing is worth the investment is exactly what we are building toward. Across many reader reactions and editorial reviews, one praise point keeps returning. The research feels massive. Not decorative, not shallow, massive. The book draws from interviews, declassified Soviet archives, unpublished memoirs, private letters, and documents that had spent decades outside public view. Readers say you can feel the weight of that work on every page. The book humanizes a disaster that history often reduces to numbers, maps, radiation levels, and abandoned buildings. It brings the workers, firefighters, engineers, wives, children, and families back into the frame. You are not just looking at Chernobyl from the outside. You are watching people live through a truth they were not fully allowed to know. And it does something else, something many readers call the book's real strength. One of the book's strongest arguments is that the Soviet system did not simply fail after the disaster. It helped create the conditions for it, and then made the aftermath more dangerous by trying to control the story. The cover-up, the delayed evacuation, the refusal of Western help, the scapegoating of plant operators for a system that had set them up to fail. Many readers say this is what the book is really about, and it is why several reviewers describe it not just as a book about Chernobyl, but as a book about what happens when a state decides its image matters more than its people. Keep that in mind, because this is where the book stops being just a disaster story and becomes a test of what kind of non-fiction reader you are. But this is where the same quality that makes the book impressive starts to frustrate some readers. The main criticism is not that the book is poorly written, it is that the book demands patience. And not every reader wants to work that hard inside a disaster story. The large cast of Soviet names, job titles, ministries, and reporting lines creates friction, especially early on. For some readers, the challenge is not the writing itself. It is the effort of tracking who holds power, who carries blame, and who disappears behind the system. A small number of readers abandoned the book early, citing the technical detail as too demanding. A smaller editorial criticism goes further, that the book may be exhaustive without always feeling emotionally intimate, and that some of its ground has been covered before. That does not seem to be the dominant reaction, but it is worth mentioning because it challenges the book at the level of emotional depth, not just pacing. That is a minority view, but it is worth knowing. Because what it reveals is something important about this book's identity. Midnight in Chernobyl rewards patient readers. It does not simplify itself to keep you comfortable. And that is not automatically a flaw, but it is a warning label. Do not pick this book up expecting a fast disaster thriller. Pick it up expecting a slow investigation into how catastrophe is built before it becomes visible. There are two debates worth naming directly. The first debate is simple. Does the density pull you deeper or make the book feel like work? For one reader, the density is proof that the book is serious. For another, it is exactly why the book becomes exhausting. Both reactions make sense. The difference tends to come down to how much prior interest you bring in Soviet history, in political systems, in how institutions fail. The second debate is subtler. Higginbotham places the Soviet political system near the center of the story, not only in the disaster itself, but in the secrecy, delay, confusion, and suffering that followed. Most readers find that framing convincing and powerful. A smaller number wonder whether the focus is so total that it leaves other questions underexplored. Questions about nuclear power itself, about bureaucratic failure in any system, about what Chernobyl might still be telling us about dangers that did not end with the Soviet Union. The book touches on those questions, but how far it pushes them divides readers more than any other aspect of the book. And this is where your expectations matter most. If you want Chernobyl as a fast-moving disaster story, the book may feel too heavy. If you want Chernobyl as a case study in power, secrecy, and institutional failure, the weight is the point. Based on consistent patterns across reader reactions and editorial reviews, Midnight in Chernobyl will probably reward you if you like narrative nonfiction with political and historical depth. If you do not just want the explosion, but the full architecture of why the explosion became possible. If Soviet history, Cold War politics, institutional failure, secrecy, and accountability interest you, this book gives you a lot to work with. And if you watched the HBO or Sky miniseries and came away wanting something more documented, more detailed, and more historically grounded, this is probably the book you were looking for. But if what you want is a lean, fast, explosion-focused account, this may frustrate you. And if you want the human tragedy without the political machinery around it, you may feel the book keeps pulling you away from emotion and back into systems. That is not a weakness for every reader, but it is the expectation trap. So the real question is not simply, is this a good book? The real question is, what kind of reader will experience this as unforgettable? And what kind of reader will experience it as overpraised? Because once you understand what the book is really trying to do, the hype, the criticism, and the reading experience finally meet in one place. Here is the truth. The hype is not wrong. It is incomplete. Midnight in Chernobyl is not an easy cinematic thriller for everyone. It is a demanding investigation disguised at times as a disaster story. What this book actually offers is one of the most detailed narrative accounts of institutional failure you are likely to find in popular nonfiction. It is the story of citizens being denied the full truth about a catastrophe unfolding around them, of experts trapped inside fear, of workers and families paying the price for political image management, of a disaster whose facts were not only dangerous because of radiation, but because of what they revealed about power. And here is the overlooked message that most reviews do not say clearly enough. This book is not really asking only how a reactor exploded. It is asking what happens when truth becomes dangerous to the people in power. That question did not die with the Soviet Union. And that is why the book still feels uncomfortable. Not because Chernobyl is ancient history, but because the instinct to protect institutions before people is still very much alive.
So, no, the praise is not empty, but it is incomplete. This is not a book for everyone. The right reader may find it unforgettable. The wrong reader may find it slow, heavy, and overpraised. So the question is not just, should you read it? The question is, are you ready for the kind of book that makes you work before it rewards you? And if you do pick this book up, come back to this video after reading it. Tell us whether the verdict was fair. Did the book reward your patience, or did the hype prepare you for the wrong experience? Your comment may help the next person decide whether to read it. And if there is another book you are curious about, one you keep seeing everywhere but you are not sure is worth your time, drop the title below. If the same book keeps showing up in the comments, that is the one we will review next. Let's build a reading list based on books people are actually trying to decide on. If this review helped you see Midnight in Chernobyl more clearly, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Here, we are not just asking whether a book is popular. We are asking whether it earns your time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next book.